COVID-19 has really shaken us up and caused us to come face to face with a reality that many of us are not fond of. Not only must we face the economic crisis, which directly affects so many of us personally, but we must also confront the emotional fallout this pandemic has caused. We've all felt sad, depressed, distressed, and anxious. In a nutshell, we're grieving. The type of grief we are experiencing may have little to do with loss of life. How do we handle this type of grief? I'm Victoria Walker, and welcome to the Choose to Think podcast. Let's find out. Marianna Rogers is the only certified grief recovery specialist in Kentucky who organizes group sessions twice a year using the grief recovery method. These face-to-face classes help participants process their grief in healthy ways. I had the privilege to chat with her recently about how to deal with grief and guilt that many of us are undergoing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. She and I go back a couple of decades when our paths crossed as home educators. She taught drama to scores of homeschooled children and directed quite a few plays with our homeschooling co-ops. She's fondly known as Miss Mimi. Now, Marianna's family owns Rogers Funeral Home in Frankfort, Kentucky. The funeral home is listed as the second oldest private business in Kentucky and the oldest business that has remained owned and operated by the same family. Now, in their seventh generation, they continue to serve families with dignity, compassion, and respect. It was nearly 8 years ago that Marianna's husband, John, passed away, which no doubt only kindled her desire to share what she's learned about grief with others who are hurting, and it motivated her to pursue certification with the Grief Recovery Institute. So stay tuned today as we take a deep dive into grief and guilt during COVID-19. I hope you walk away feeling validated and encouraged. But before we dive in, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and write a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. I would really appreciate your endorsement. I also have a listener support tab just in case you would consider financially supporting this podcast to help others learn about God, His Word, and to find inspiration and hope in their journey to choose to think. Also, did you know that the Choose to Think Academy is offering a pre-launch discount for the course called Choose to Think when your soul is hungry? If you've handled the COVID-19 stress by going to food, you might really be interested in this fully digital, faith-based class to help you overcome food issues, food hang-ups once and for all. Check out the show notes for a link for more information as well as the pre-launch discount. Save 20% now as an individual or 33% with a group of 10 or less. Welcome, Marianna. I am so excited to be with you today, not only because you're such an incredible friend and someone that I admire so much from our homeschooling years, your political savviness, just the wisdom that you have in general in life. You're so dear to me. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I deserve all that praise, but it was very kind of you to say all of that anyway. Thank you. And, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, anybody who knows you would be saying, yes, keep going, Victoria, keep going, keep going. Okay, so we're gonna just dive right in to guilt and grief during this COVID-19 season, crisis that we're in. And can you speak a little bit to just, how folks are feeling? What do we mean by grief? What help can you offer for grief during the COVID-19 crisis? Like, could you tell us what grief is? And then maybe speak a little bit on emotional isolation. Give us some examples because we're all right there. And then maybe give us some tips on what we can do to combat emotional isolation during this time.
Well, let's talk about grief in general and normal activities that we would be doing at this time, which we are unable to do. And then maybe we'll go into the grief, the guilt for a minute, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. the problem with our society is that we don't deal with grief in general very well anyway. Most people don't recognize it for what it is. So I'm part of the Grief Recovery Institute as a specialist, and we have two definitions of grief. One of them is that it's just a normal reaction to a loss of any kind. And the other one is, I think, more appropriate for the situation that we're in, and that is the emotional feelings that we have, which are normal, when our circumstances are upset, when there's a change in behavior because something has ended or just something has changed. And we're very accustomed to a certain pattern of living. And then all of a sudden that changes, and we don't know quite how to deal with that. And if there ever was a time when society is going through that, it's now. What's happening right now is that our normalcy has been taken away from us. So, whereas every day you might go into work, you might stop to get your coffee, you might be chatting with your coworkers, dropping your kids off at school. There's church activities that we can't do. And I know many people who are upset because they cannot go to the gym regularly. So,
Mm-hmm.
these people are all at a loss. What do you do with that time? And what do you do to replace it? And this has been something that you're accustomed to that generally makes you happy or fulfilled. So now what are you supposed to do with it? That's the question. So that is what grief is. It's your normal, natural response to something like this. And the problem is finding a way to deal with it.
Right. And emotionally, we do feel isolated. I mean, I'm here with Matthew, and, he's actually back at work now. But otherwise, there is some sense of isolation that I'm even feeling as a reason. And I normally work from home, mostly work from
Right.
home, but there are still certain restrictions that are really kind of pinching down and cramping me a little bit emotionally. So can you offer some ideas on how we can handle that? Or what are some good workarounds so that instead of feeling emotionally isolated, we can still get that connection that we need for other people, although it's not in the
We're
way
not
that we,
allowed.
yeah, or that we're accustomed to doing it. We can't go down to the coffee shop and sit on the
Sure.
sidewalk. So what can we do instead? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mariana?
Yes, well, we're made to be social beings. There are people who enjoy a lot of solitude. You have solitude, I have solitude, but I'm a very social person. So this has been difficult for me, quite honestly, to not be able to go out and be with people and that sort of thing. So it's important that maintain contact with people, and there, of course, one of the blessings in all of this is technology, that we're able to use telephones, Facebook, and other social media to maintain contact with people. And it's very important that we do that. And along those lines, I think it's important that you not only say you have the ability to do that, but that you follow through and you do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a good friend, you need to make a time when you're going to connect with each other just to chat and check up on each other and see how you are. And then if you have someone that you really trust and you're feeling really bad, make a deal that, hey, if I'm feeling down, I'm going to call you, and likewise, you call me. So in this day and age, we're lucky that we have that ability to use technology to be in touch with each other. But I think it really has to be an intentional thing at this point. As long as we are staying within the regulations that we've been given, I think it's fine to get out and do things for other people. I've recommended, taking your children and going and mowing someone's lawn. You can
Mm.
do social distancing with something like that, or weeding their garden, or planting, or whatever. And I think a lot of this is just finding something to help you stay busy and keep yourself occupied, so that you're not constantly dwelling on what is negative, but on what is positive, and what you can do to and it's always better when you serve other people. Your mind's on them and not on you.
Mm-hmm. That's so helpful. I like that mindset shift. I know every morning I was getting up, and I it felt like I had this dark cloud over me or something, and not for any good reason really, but other than it's just like I feel like I'm in this kind of monotony, and
Or
not that
yeah,
monotony's bad, but it just I kept and so this is what I was saying, okay, wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's kind of what I felt like every morning, like here we go. And it was my attitude. And then I recognized that and I'm like, okay, I need to shift my mindset and my attitude here. And I was able to switch it to rise, shine, and glorify.
yes,
And just doing that little teeny mindset shift really helped me to feel like even though I'm quote, isolated, I still have a purpose and I still have important things that I need to do. And like you said a moment ago, trying to help others. Is there something that I can do in my day to take my eyes off myself and my situation and shift it over to being of service to somebody else? And that, for some reason, I guess the way God built us too,
it
it
is.
broadens my horizon a little bit and it keeps it from being just the same old, same old.
Well, you
And
are a very insightful person, Victoria, to begin with. So, you would naturally ask yourself, what's going on with me? A lot of people don't even think to do that. So, I think the most important thing is to recognize what's going on, that you are grieving your normalcy in your life. And then,
mhm,
then ask yourself, what can I do to fix it? And externally you cannot do anything to fix it, but internally you can. And as you mentioned, attitude is a lot of this. I
mhm.
tell myself, when I'm down and I have a bad moment, that I'm having a moment. I don't say that I'm having a bad day, because as you know, there's power in the words that we speak. And so if I say I'm going to have a bad day or I'm having a bad day, I'm really setting myself up for that. So rather than say that, I say, I'm just having a moment, and that moment is going to pass. Now, Christians will understand this as taking every thought captive, but it really,
Mhm.
truly does work. And I also think it's important. Music is a wonderful therapy and it's used all the time. But, if you put upbeat praise music or even rock music on in your house, Disney music I used when my children were young, it's very difficult not to be in a better frame of mind when you have some good music going on. And I've been known to even dance around the house by myself. So a lot
Yes,
of it's a
yes.
lot of it's just your attitude, and recognizing, okay, I'm bored. This is monotonous. I need to get out of this. What can I do to bring myself out of this?
I
And
love it. I love it. I love that those are, first of all, the a moment mindset or that frame of mind is so hopeful because it can be so discouraging. It's like, oh, but yet if I think, okay, it's just I'm having a moment. This is not going to last forever. We will get through this.
yes,
And
as we're
that's just
told,
such
yes.
a do what?
As we are told, yes, we will get through
Yes,
this together. But we
we
don't know what
will.
the end is, and we don't know what the end is going to be like. So I would just encourage people not to lock yourself into that sense of doom and that sense of hopelessness. Just say this is temporary. And like my moment of sadness is temporary. It's just a moment.
Perfect. That's wonderful. And then the action item of listening to music. You know what? I do the same thing. I have a little miniature trampoline in my
Oh, I love
office.
it.
Yep. And so I'll put the music on, get it blaring, and I'm just jumping around. I'm getting my steps in that way, especially we've had these gloomy days, right?
Yes,
Rain. Oh my
and the
goodness.
physical
What's
activity
happening?
is very important too. So you're getting
Yeah.
that. I'm not doing so well with that, but you're doing well.
Yeah, and it's important to me because I know that that's healthy and it gets my blood pumping a little bit and then plus I'll put the music on to boot and suddenly my spirits are lifted. So I appreciate that you're saying, you know what, we do have responsibility in this and we can take those thoughts captive and shift our mindset.
Well,
So
we really do not have to be victims to all of this. It's very easy to fall into the doldrums and depression, and I worry because we're going to see a lot of depression and some worse. things come from this. But I would encourage everybody out there just to take a moment, recognize the moment for what it is, and share this with other people too. Encourage other people, and that's also very helpful. To take your mind off of yourself is to pray for someone else and encourage someone else, and do that verbally. Not just in a text. I like phone calls and video chats. They're much more meaningful than a text message is.
Before we talk about why we're feeling guilty these days, let's take a break from our sponsors. Listen, are you having trouble sleeping, focusing, or relaxing? If the answer is yes, then the TM Soft's White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast has got you covered. This hour-long podcast is made to help you get rid of distractions, reduce stress, relax, and get better sleep. You can listen to the sounds of nature, white noise, relaxing music, and so much more. You can check out the TM Soft's White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. People are feeling guilty during this time. Why would someone feel guilt? Can you go into that?
This kind of surprised me. I had several people ask me about this actually on Facebook, and when I got to thinking about it, it really did make sense. Well, people are saying, I feel guilty because this person, my friend, is so much worse off than I am. He's lost his job. Their family is struggling financially. And then you have the other end, which is, someone who has actually lost a life or lost a loved one as a result of the virus. So, you feel guilty because your experience is not quite that bad. So, it could be anything from you're not alone, but you know someone who is. You're an introvert. The isolation doesn't bother you as much as other people. And one thing that you and I had talked about earlier was that some people are learning new things, languages, and they're getting things accomplished in their homes and renovating and cleaning out and doing all of these things. And I might not be, so that might make me feel a little guilty. Which is one thing I need to say is we never, in dealing with grief, we encourage people never ever to compare yourself to someone else, because everybody's grief, everybody's feelings are unique and individual to you. And so are your relationships. So, when you look at someone who's, oh gosh, they've painted their entire house, or she's made, 400 masks or whatever, that is wonderful, and congratulate them for that. But that's not necessarily your place. That's not necessarily where you are. So when we talk about guilt, what you're feeling in a situation like that is really not guilt. It's mostly compassion for people who are not as well off as you are, or sympathy. Guilt involves intent. So we didn't ask for this. You did not wish this on your neighbor, and you didn't wish for someone in their family to die, or you did not wish for someone to lose their job. So if you've not done anything intentionally to harm someone, then you've not got anything to feel guilty about, because that's the definition of guilt. It's intent.
Right. This is so helpful. And the feeling that I have had when you mentioned that about everyone doing their projects and, they're renovating their homes and their lawns are looking so great. And, I'm still working my regular full-time job at home. And so it's all systems go from the minute I get up until I go to bed. And I have felt, and I'm sorry to confess this, but I have felt jealousy and envy of the fact that, gosh, I wish I could do that. Or
Right.
I wish I had this unemployment benefit coming my way, or the extra $600 a week, or it's, so obviously that's a root that's, or thoughts or whatever in my mind, in my heart, that I have to fight against. And I can come around to saying, okay, well, hold up, Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to let your mind go there, because it is the comparison trap, like you said, which I can't think of any good thing to come out of a comparison trap,
Nothing. Yeah.
other than I don't want to get in that trap again. But I've had to fight hard against this vision of, wow, if only I had all this time, then I could paint my living room too. And so what I've learned to do instead is say, okay, Victoria, let's shift the attitude again. And what is your mindset? Can you be grateful that you have a job? Can
Yes.
you be thankful that your particular industry is it's going to change because I'm in higher education, as you
Mhm.
know,
Yes.
and the face of that is changing a little bit, and it's been quite a bit stressful on us, college and university instructors.
It's uncharted
We're
waters for a lot of people.
Yes, so but most people still value higher education, and it doesn't seem like colleges and universities are going to go away. So I know that I'm in a profession that does have some security, and there's a demand
Mhm.
for that.
Right.
However, it's those are the things that I have to look at when I'm feeling like, well, why can't I be out cleaning out my closets right now, and stuff like that that seems like other folks can do that have a lot more time right now. I try to pull back and say, what are you thankful for, Victoria? I ask myself those things, and then I also encourage myself by saying, fortunately, I don't have to teach as many classes over the summer. I don't choose to. So therefore, I can have my time. So I'm like, okay, what would you like to do, Victoria? If when you have time coming up down the road, how are you going to prioritize the projects? And what is it that, so I can dream a little bit. So I've been dreaming about maybe I'll paint my kitchen and get new appliances, something like that keeps me out of that envy or that kind of trap. And it sounds so selfish. I'm admitting this right now
No,
that
it's not.
I'm sorry that that's going through my head, but I've
Human
had those
nature.
thoughts.
In fact, I'm going to tell you that the irony is that there are probably people who are envying you
Mm-hmm.
because you still have work to do and they don't. And so for them, it's probably difficult to find something to occupy their time. It's such a trap to compare ourselves to others, no matter what side you're on. So I guarantee you
Mm-hmm.
there are people who are looking at other people who are working and saying, I wish I still had a job to go to, or I wish I could work from home because they don't have any work at all. So, just there's always that. There's always the danger of comparing yourself to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something I have to, and I think I'm kind of over that now because
Yeah.
I work through those emotions and
Well,
those
and I wanted
feelings.
to,
And
since you touched on that, I wanted to mention too that, this is a very difficult time for all of us. I saw someone write something and it was author unknown, so I have no idea who wrote it, but it was a very good little post on Facebook, and it said, we are not all in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat because some of us are on a yacht while some of us are in a rowboat. And that really is very good analogy of where we all are. Everybody's different, which is why we can't compare ourselves to one another. But what we can do during this time is some introspection, like you have been doing. It's an opportunity to see how we react in these circumstances. And so I would encourage people just to take a few moments every day, or every other day, or whatever, and spend some quiet time and just ask God or ask yourself, whatever, how am I coping, and what can I learn from this? What happened to me yesterday? How did I react to that? And how do I wish I had reacted? Grief is also about things that we wish we had done different, better, or more. And I'm positive that when we come out of this, there are going to be many people who are going to wish that they'd done something different, better, or more.
how do we deal with that? How do, like, when you're coaching folks who are grieving and they have those three areas, what is the how do we come to peace with that? With, oh, why didn't I do this? Or I wish I had done this differently, or more of this, or less of this. How do you coach them through that?
Well, it depends. If we're talking about the death of someone, that's a totally different way of dealing with something. But it's going back and being honest about how you felt emotionally at the time, and then recognizing that some emotions are harmful, and that there's not necessarily truth in everything. That you just examine it and say, okay, what was truthful about this, and what did I like about the way I handled this, and what did I not, and what can I change about myself in the future? Because there are behaviors that we engage in temporarily that give us temporary relief from our grief, but they don't really do anything long term. They don't work for good.
Mm-hmm.
Like shopping. I'm bad about being on Amazon. And
Right.
some people sleep, some people drink. So I mean, there's certain things that we do. So part of what I do is help people to recognize those behaviors, so that we can not do those destructive behaviors, which they're not always destructive, but a lot of times when we do them to excess, they are.
Gotcha. Okay, and Marianna, I know we're going to wrap this up, and I think I'm going to ask you a question that may surprise you. And if you
Okay.
don't want to answer it, you don't have to. The question is, I'm thinking about John,
Yes.
your husband John, who passed away. When did he pass away? What year was that?
It was July of 2012, so it's been 7.5 years.
Oh my
I know.
goodness, I can't believe it's been
Yeah,
that
yeah,
long. Okay. This is my question.
sure.
What would John, what would his reaction be right now during COVID-19? How would he encourage you or your heart during this time, or your kids? What would he say about all
He
this?
would absolutely love the fact that I'm doing grief recovery, because he was the one that was interested in it to begin with. And he actually worked with this group, the Grief Recovery Institute, in the early 1990s. So he would be thrilled that I'm doing this, not only to help other people, but it's been a tremendous help for myself, in dealing with my grief for him.
Mhm.
And I still do grieve for him. It's not that I don't miss him or anything. I have moments when I still cry, and
I'm
that is,
sure.
if I could leave people with one thing,
Oh, Marianna, did I lose you?
it would be honest about your emotions. Talk with your family, especially with your children. Your children are going to model what the behavior that they see in you. And crying is okay. Crying's a good thing, because it's God's way of allowing us to release all those emotions. And it's actually our body's physiological reaction to all of those emotions. So, don't hold it in. Holding it in can bring you illness and all kinds of trouble. So, I would say be honest in a constructive way, and just, do your best to talk with your family, and work it out that way.
If John were here, how would you 2 be processing COVID-19?
He would be very frustrated with the physical constraints of
Would he?
of this.
Okay.
He would not be happy. So we'd be having a lot of political discussions about this,
I
to be
bet.
honest with you, because we always did to begin with. But that would be a therapy for us. Honestly, would be just to discuss. Okay, if I were in charge, what would I do? That sort of thing. We had a lot of good banter between us, but he would just be encouraging me to spend time with the Lord, and just be quiet and be still, and be calm, and just recognize that this is temporary and not
Yeah.
permanent. And he would love, just being in the moment.
Being in the moment, being present, being calm, and being still. This is definitely a higher ground takeaway. And what are a few more? Number 1, recognize that you're grieving, and that's okay. Number 2, be intentional and take positive, healthy actions to help yourself process your feelings during this time. Number 3, shift your mindset, show gratitude, choose to think. Number 4, fix what you can control. Focus on what you can do in these conditions. Number 5, your words are powerful. Avoid self focus and reach out to others verbally to encourage them, help them, and pray for them. Number 6, resist the victim mentality as well as the comparison trap. Number 7, be at peace with the fact that although we are in the same storm, we're not in the same boat. And number 8, be honest with yourself. Examine and express your thoughts and feelings. Cry. Take a deep breath. Remember, this is just a moment. Let's pray. Father, thank you for being our strength, our joy, our peace, our refuge. I lift up our nation to you, our leaders and officials, the many who are grieving from having lost their loved ones, or who are suffering physically, economically, emotionally during this time. Sift our hearts and clear our minds. Help us to hear your voice during this time. Remind us daily that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. In his name I pray, amen. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful for you. Check out the show notes below for more information about Marianna, grief recovery, and the great work that she does. And until next time, Dios primero y que Dios te bendiga. Ciao.